They didn't fire me for reporting him. They just erased me shift by shift, until I barely existed on paper. I stood in the break room pretending to sip from an empty coffee cup, staring at the corkboard where the weekly schedule was posted. My name used to show up 4-5 days a week. Now? One lonely afternoon shift. 4 hours. That was it. It wasn't a mistake. I knew it. Melissa, our office manager, always triple-checked. This was deliberate. Quiet punishment for saying something I wasn't supposed to say. And I said it out loud. I filed a report against Tyler McAdams. The golden boy. Our regional sales rep with too much charm and too little self-awareness, or maybe just too much confidence in what he could get away with. Before I get too deep into it, let me tell you who I am. I'm Sierra Johnson, 33 years old, born and raised in Nevada. I've always worked. I don't come from money. No safety nets. No old family lake house waiting for me to get back on my feet. I paid my way through UNLV doing food delivery at night and admin shifts during the day. By the time I landed a full-time job at Carson & Hale, a mid-sized design agency downtown, I thought I'd made it. Not rich, but stable. I had health insurance, PTO, a 401k I actually understood. That felt like luxury. I was never the loudest in the room, but I was reliable. I showed up early, stayed late, didn't gossip. I brought bagels on Fridays. When the senior manager went on maternity leave, I stepped up, unofficially, and ran the team for 6 weeks. No title change. No raise. Just a lot of late nights and a verbal, "We really appreciate you." Tyler was hired during that time. Good-looking, slick. The kind of guy who turned everything into a joke, especially if he got caught crossing a line. At first, it was small stuff. Calling me Sister Sierra in meetings. Too many jokes about being the office work wife. I brushed it off. We all did. Tyler closed deals and clients liked him. The higher-ups saw that and gave him more space than they should have. But then he started getting bolder. Hovering too close at happy hours. Comments about my outfits. One night at a client dinner, his hand grazed my lower back and stayed there long enough that I physically stepped away. When I looked at him, shocked, he just smirked and said, "Relax. It's been a long day." That was the moment I stopped laughing off his behavior. The next morning, I walked straight into HR with everything I had, a detailed report, times, dates, even witness notes from another coworker who'd pulled me aside more than once and asked, "Is Tyler like that with you too?" The HR rep, Carla, kept her expression neutral. She took notes. She said the words they all say, "We take these concerns seriously. This will remain confidential. We'll review it internally." I walked out shaky but proud. I'd spoken up. I'd done the right thing. And that's when things began to change. The silence was the first sign. No follow-up from HR. No email. No confirmation. Not even a "we're looking into it." Days passed. Then weeks. Tyler, meanwhile, acted like nothing happened. He whistled around the office. Took long lunches. Brought in donuts for the team. One morning he leaned over my cubicle and said, "You miss me?" Like we were still playing some inside joke I never agreed to be part of. Then came the scheduling. Melissa pulled me aside casually and said, "Hey, just a heads up, we had to cut a few hours this week. Client pipeline's a little soft." I nodded, until I checked the board and saw it. Everyone else had normal hours. Mine were slashed in half. The next week was worse. When I brought it up, Melissa tilted her head like I was being overly sensitive. "It's not personal, Sierra. It's just restructuring. You're still on the team." Still on the team. That line stuck in my head for days. It didn't feel like it. Not when my projects were quietly reassigned. Not when people stopped asking me for feedback on anything. Not when I sat at my desk watching Slack channels fill up with meetings I hadn't been invited to. And then the meeting happened. It was our quarterly all-staff. We all filed into the conference room with coffee and plastic-wrapped muffins. They always did a few cheesy awards, above and beyond, client hero, stuff like that. Nothing official, just recognition. I'd led 3 back-to-back client projects that came in under budget and ahead of schedule. I had half hoped I might get a shout-out. But when the Client Hero Award came up, it went to Tyler. And not just that, the slideshow behind the award had a photo of him with his arms slung around me. From a work party 6 months ago. I remember that night clearly because I didn't want to be in the photo. He'd pulled me in without asking. I smiled tight, just to get it over with. Now it was being projected on a giant screen while the room clapped and laughed like we were some kind of team sitcom. Tyler turned, locked eyes with me, and gave a lazy salute. I forced a smile. I didn't clap. I couldn't. I just sat there, burning. Later, I overheard 2 interns whispering in the hallway, "Didn't she file something against him?" Guess it didn't stick. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed with my phone open, staring at my bank app. I was down to $382 in checking. Rent was due in 8 days. The last paycheck was barely half of what I'd earned before. If they cut me again, I wouldn't be able to cover groceries and gas. I wasn't just being excluded. I was being set up to leave. The next morning, I logged into our internal scheduling portal to see if anything had changed. My name wasn't there. Not on the schedule. Not in the directory. My login still worked, but everything else was gone. Confused, I scrolled to the bottom of the page and saw it. On call, S. Johnson, available for fill-in shifts. That section was usually for freelancers. Former interns. People who filled in during summer breaks. I'd been demoted to as-needed status. No warning. No conversation. No paper trail. And that's when I realized something bone-deep. They weren't just trying to make me uncomfortable. They were trying to make me disappear. The morning after I saw my name downgraded to on-call, I unplugged my work laptop, carried it outside, and dropped it, gently but deliberately, into the donation bin behind the Goodwill on Keystone Avenue. I didn't look back to see if anyone saw me. It didn't matter. That machine had been a leash for too long. Let them wonder why it never got returned. Let them email me about it. Let them file some ticket in IT. I wouldn't see it. I'd already blocked every company domain from my inbox. When I got home, I tossed my badge into the trash, changed out of my work clothes, even though I'd barely worn them lately, and folded them into a donation bag too. Then I stood in front of the mirror, held up my favorite burgundy lipstick, and put it on. Not for a meeting. Not for anyone else. Just because it felt like mine again. People think falling apart looks like sobbing or eating ice cream in the dark. Sometimes it does. But sometimes it looks like deleting Slack, canceling autopay for your student loans, and realizing you might not have enough money to pay your internet bill next month. That was me. In silence. No breakdown. Just an eerie stillness that settled over everything, like dust in a house no one lives in anymore. I didn't go into work. I didn't quit either. I just stopped showing up. No one called. No one checked. I stopped getting the Happy Friday messages from the office manager. I stopped being tagged in any company-wide threads. It was like I'd never existed there. No formal goodbye. Just gone. My bank account was the only one who noticed. Rent was due in 11 days. My last check was less than half my normal pay, and I'd already used most of it covering groceries and co-pays. I canceled Netflix. I sold my coffee table. I tried applying to other jobs, but every draft of a cover letter felt like an apology. I didn't want to explain what happened. I didn't want to pretend it had been mutual or clean. It hadn't. And I wasn't done pretending. That Friday, I went to the laundromat with a Ziploc bag full of quarters and detergent pods I'd been hoarding since winter. While my clothes spun, I opened Instagram out of habit and immediately wished I hadn't. Carson and Hale had posted a boomerang, one of those choppy little videos with no sound, of Tyler spinning in his chair with a party hat on. The caption said, "Sales Rockstar of the Month. Party Popper direct hit, keep crushing it, Tyler." I felt the air suck out of my lungs. The comments were full of fire emojis and legend, replies from coworkers. And then I saw one from Aria, a junior designer I used to mentor, "You're irreplaceable. Not the same without you at the table. Not the same without you. You. Him." He was now the story they were telling. I clicked into her profile without thinking and saw a recent photo, the team at a rooftop bar. Tyler at the center. Melissa on his left, laughing into her drink. Someone had tagged the location. Just across town. They were celebrating. Celebrating the man I reported. Celebrating after I'd been erased. And that's when the shift happened. Not rage. Not despair. Something else. Like someone had cleared the fog around me and now I could finally see the edges. I didn't cry. I didn't look away. I just stared at that photo and whispered to myself, "They think you're gone." But I wasn't gone. I was just silent. And silence can be sharp if you use it right. That night, I did something I hadn't done in months. I opened the HR policy handbook I'd saved from my onboarding. I didn't skim it this time. I read every page. Every clause about retaliation. Every detail about protected reports. I highlighted language. I took notes. And when I reached the part that confirmed what I already knew, that what had happened to me was not just unfair but illegal, I didn't flinch. The next morning, I sold 2 pairs of heels I used to wear for client pitches and used the money to pay my phone bill. Then I made the call. "This is the Nevada Equal Rights Commission," the voice on the other end said. I took a breath and answered clearly. "My name is Sierra Johnson. I believe I've been retaliated against by my employer after reporting workplace harassment. I want to file a formal complaint." Her voice didn't change. She didn't gasp or pause or ask if I was sure. She just said, "Okay. Let's start from the beginning." That conversation didn't fix anything. But it felt like I'd finally walked into a room where the lights were on. Over the next few days, I let my silence stretch further. I deleted LinkedIn. I logged out of my professional email. I turned off notifications from former coworkers. When Aria messaged me a casual "hope you're well," I didn't answer. She hadn't reached out when I disappeared from the schedule. She hadn't asked where I went. She had laughed at Tyler's boomerang. I had nothing to say to her. I stopped pretending I was trying to stay connected. People assumed I'd moved on. And I let them believe it. But quietly, in the background, I was gathering things. I printed out my pay stubs. I copied the original report I'd sent HR. I documented every change in my schedule, every instance of communication where my hours were cut. I made a spreadsheet. I color-coded it. And then, one night, I started a new list titled, "Former Employees to Reach Out To." I started with Tasha. She had left suddenly 6 months earlier. No explanation. One day she was in the bullpen, the next she was gone. We hadn't been close, but I remembered the way she'd looked at me when Tyler made a joke about long weekends and shared hotel rooms during a team meeting. Her smile had frozen, just for a second. I remembered that. So I messaged her. "Hey, this is Sierra from Carson and Hale. I hope this isn't weird, but I'd love to ask you something. It's about your time there, specifically your decision to leave." She replied 2 hours later. "Oh wow. I was just thinking about that place this morning." "Go ahead. Ask." I paused, then wrote, "Did you leave because of Tyler?" The typing dots showed up almost instantly. "Yes. 100%. I never said it out loud to anyone because I didn't think it would matter. HR didn't take me seriously. I didn't even file a report. I just left. I stared at her message, feeling my hands shake slightly. I wasn't the first. I wasn't even the second. She went on, he made a comment at a conference about wanting to see what was under all that blazer. I told my manager. You know what she said? That he was just high energy and I should take it as a compliment. I didn't type anything back for a while. I just let it sit in my chest. That familiar cold. And then I wrote, I filed a report last month. And now I'm on call. I haven't had a real shift in 3 weeks. Tasha sent back a single line that changed everything. Let me know if you're ever ready to make noise. I'd join you. That night, I made more lists. I reached out to an old colleague who'd left 2 years earlier. I messaged a freelance designer who told me, offhand once, that she felt weird around Tyler. I didn't say much. I just asked if they'd had a strange experience at Carson and Hale. 3 said yes. 2 said they'd kept screenshots just in case. 1 had even recorded a voicemail from him after hours. I wasn't the only one gathering things. That weekend, I bought a used desk from Facebook Marketplace and set it up in the corner of my bedroom. I printed everything. I created folders. I labeled them carefully, not out of habit, but out of intention. Because I wasn't building a case. I was building a story. A story that was no longer just mine. 3 days later, I received a text from Melissa. Hey Sierra. Hope you're doing well. Just wanted to check in and see if you'd be open to picking up a few hours this week. We've got some gaps and would love your help. I didn't answer right away. I reread it 3 times. She hadn't said anything when my hours were cut. She hadn't responded to my report. She hadn't spoken to me in weeks. And now that something was brewing under the surface, now that people were beginning to whisper, now that I had quietly filed a claim and started reaching out to women who'd gone silent too, now, she wanted me back. No explanation. No accountability. Just hours. Like a dog being called back to the porch after being left in the rain. I thought about Tyler's party hat. About Tasha. About the intern who messaged me the week before saying, I always wondered why you disappeared. And I typed a single line back. Thanks for the offer. I'm not available. But enjoy it while it lasts. She didn't reply. But I didn't need her to. Because something had shifted now, not just in me, but in the balance of things. The story wasn't theirs anymore. It was mine. And I wasn't finished telling it. The day everything began to shift, it started with a mistake, their mistake, not mine. I opened my email one quiet morning to find a message that wasn't meant for me. The subject line was almost ordinary, internal follow-up, Tyler case. For a second, I thought maybe they were finally acknowledging what I'd reported months ago. But when I clicked it open, I realized it was a thread forwarded by accident, from Melissa to the HR rep, Carla. My name was right there in the body of the message, followed by sentences that made my skin crawl. Do not confirm any ongoing report. Sierra's situation is being reframed as a voluntary transition off full-time status. Please scrub language and payroll records accordingly. There was more, avoid referencing harassment or retaliation. She's been quiet, so let's keep it that way. No need to re-engage. Just freeze her out and move forward. I read it twice, my heart thudding so loud it drowned out the hum of my old refrigerator. The same people who smiled through every HR meeting were now instructing others to erase the truth, in writing. The entire company had conspired to gaslight me on paper, to rewrite history in their favor, and to do it with a tone that sounded like they were handling an administrative hiccup instead of someone's life. For months, I had been doubting myself, wondering if I had imagined the hostility or exaggerated the retaliation. Now, here it was, proof. Cold, bureaucratic proof that I had been targeted. I didn't forward it to anyone. I didn't respond. Instead, I printed it, sealed it in a manila envelope, and wrote the date in red ink at the top, July 18th, confirmation. I remember whispering the word out loud as if saying it made it more real. Confirmation. It wasn't paranoia. It wasn't bad luck. It was a system designed to protect the man who had made me feel small. And now I had caught it in the act. But what I didn't expect was the satisfaction that followed. It wasn't joy exactly, more like a slow, clean burn of clarity. For months, I'd been living in a fog, questioning everything I knew about fairness, loyalty, and justice. But that fog evaporated as I held that piece of paper in my hands. They wanted me to stay quiet. They wanted me invisible. They wanted me too tired, too scared, too broke to fight back. And for the first time, I realized that silence wasn't surrender. It was strategy. Later that week, I went out for groceries and ran into Aria, one of the younger designers from the office. She smiled when she saw me, but it was a strange smile, too cheerful, like someone masking guilt. "Oh my God, Sierra. How are you? We miss you at the office." I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. I didn't realize I'd been missed. She fumbled with her keys, laughing too loudly. "Well, the place isn't the same without you. Tyler's been saying you left to start your own business or something. He said you needed freedom. We were all so proud." Her words landed like a slap. I wanted to ask if she believed him, if she ever wondered why the woman who trained her was suddenly gone without notice. But instead, I just smiled faintly. "Freedom," I repeated. "That's one word for it." She relaxed, thinking I agreed, and waved goodbye as she headed to her car. The moment she drove away, my hands were shaking. Freedom. They'd turned my erasure into a self-improvement story. They'd turned my silence into choice. And somehow, everyone believed it. That night, I opened the folder on my laptop labeled HR Report, Confidential, and started expanding it. I created subfolders: retaliation timeline, witness accounts, deleted correspondence, company misconduct. I didn't even realize what I was building yet, but something in me had shifted. This wasn't about anger anymore. It was about control. For so long, they'd decided what story was told about me. Now, I was writing the new one, and I was going to make sure it was the version that survived. Within a week, I'd tracked down 2 former coworkers through LinkedIn, both of whom had left quietly after similar experiences with Tyler. One of them, Tasha, responded almost immediately. "I always wondered if I was the only one," she wrote. "He made comments during my client trips, and when I said something, Melissa told me I was misinterpreting workplace friendliness. I left the next month." Another woman, Callie, told me she'd been warned by a colleague not to make trouble if she wanted to keep her health insurance. I listened to every story and took notes. Each detail fit like a puzzle piece into a picture I had already started to see. This wasn't a misunderstanding, it was a pattern. We started a group chat, the 5 of us. At first, it was awkward, just sharing timelines and memories. Then, gradually, it became something else. We weren't victims anymore, we were investigators. Every day, someone contributed something new: an old email, a calendar invite that contradicted HR's story, a Slack message where Melissa called me volatile for asking about my hours. I printed everything, color-coded each woman's section, and assembled it all in a thick binder I labeled simply, "The Record." It was around that time that I got a notification on my phone. The company had posted a photo of Tyler on LinkedIn, shaking hands with a client, captioned, "Celebrating leadership that sets the standard for respect and professionalism." I sat there in my kitchen, staring at that word, respect, until it started to blur. I knew exactly what they were doing. They were promoting him again. I could almost hear the speech he'd give at the next conference. I could picture the smile Melissa would wear when she introduced him as our success story. And suddenly, that quiet resolve I'd been building turned sharp again. I wanted to end this, not just for me but for every woman they'd buried under false professionalism. That's when I called June. She was an employment lawyer I'd met years earlier at a local networking event. I told her everything, every message, every hour cut, every email, every witness. When I finished, there was silence. And then she said, in a calm voice that felt both grounding and electric, "Sierra, what you've just described isn't just retaliation. It's systemic cover-up. And depending on how many women are willing to join, this isn't just a case, it's class action territory." I didn't realize I'd been holding my breath until I let it out. "I have proof," I told her. She asked me to bring everything. The next day, I met June at her downtown office. The walls were lined with case binders, neatly labeled by year. I placed mine on her desk and watched as she flipped through it slowly. When she reached the printed copy of that mistaken email, she paused, reading the lines carefully before looking up at me. "Do you understand what this means?" she asked. I nodded. "It means they knew exactly what they were doing." June closed the binder gently, folded her hands, and said, "I want you to know something, Sierra. People think revenge is about rage. It's not. It's about precision. You don't destroy them with noise. You destroy them with proof." That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because I was afraid, but because for the first time since this started, I felt powerful. I knew what was coming, and they didn't. They thought I was a ghost, someone who drifted away quietly. But while they were posting hashtags about respect, I was documenting every contradiction. I was lining up witnesses. I was preparing to make their lies public record. A few days later, June contacted the other women. 3 agreed to join immediately. 2 asked for time. 1 said she couldn't risk it, her new job still had ties to the company. I understood. Not everyone can afford to fight, but enough of us were ready that it didn't matter. June drafted letters, collected affidavits, and sent a formal notice to Carson and Hale stating that a retaliation and harassment claim had been filed. When the notice went out, I didn't hear anything from Melissa. Not a word. But I knew she'd seen it. The way I knew was through silence, the kind that hums just before panic begins. I didn't check my phone much, but one night I opened my email and saw a forwarded message from an old coworker who still worked there. The subject line read, "Crisis Management Plan, internal only." Attached was a memo outlining anticipated PR response strategies in case former employees attempt to defame the company. There was even a line that made me laugh out loud, "Maintain narrative that Sierra left voluntarily for personal reasons. Do not engage directly with her or associates." They were terrified, and it showed. That same week, I ran into Tyler at a cafe near downtown. I hadn't expected it, I was just there picking up a sandwich when I heard that voice behind me, smooth and rehearsed. "Well, if it isn't our favorite disappearing act." I turned slowly. He was dressed impeccably, flashing the same grin that used to disarm clients. "Didn't expect to see you still in town," he said, leaning casually on the counter. "Thought you'd moved on. I mean, you quit, right?" It took everything in me not to smile. "Is that what they told you?" He blinked, feigning innocence. "That's what I heard." "Hey, I'm just glad you're happy. No hard feelings, right?" I leaned in slightly, keeping my voice soft. "No hard feelings at all, Tyler. But just a little advice, you might want to start reading your emails more carefully. People send the strangest things by accident these days." He frowned, clearly not following. I paid for my sandwich, thanked the cashier, and walked out. But behind me, I could feel his confusion turning into unease. And that was enough. Later that night, I texted June, "We're ready." She replied within seconds, "Good. Let's begin the formal filings next week." They won't see it coming. When I closed my phone, I looked around my apartment, at the empty boxes, the paperwork stacked on my desk, the notes pinned to the wall. It looked like the inside of a mind that had rebuilt itself from scratch. And maybe that was exactly what it was. They thought my silence meant defeat. They mistook withdrawal for weakness. They didn't realize that while they were crafting lies, I was crafting evidence. While they were celebrating promotions, I was assembling truth. And truth, when it arrives, doesn't knock politely. It tears the door off its hinges. The first crack wasn't subtle. It came in the form of a text message at 6:14 a.m. from one of the women still working inside the company. There in a full panic, it read. Emergency meeting. Someone forwarded your case to a client. Melissa is losing it. I hadn't even gotten out of bed yet. I stared at the screen while the news alerts started rolling in. Headlines that used to ignore us were now doing the opposite. Nevada firm faces allegations of harassment and retaliation, employees speak out. The Equal Rights Commission statement had gone public, and from the moment it hit the wire, it was like pulling the pin on a grenade. By the time I made coffee, the company's website was down for maintenance. Their Instagram comments were flooded with people demanding answers. I saw one from a former intern that said, "We always knew something was off. Thank you for finally exposing them." I didn't reply, but I liked it, not to be seen, but so she'd know we were watching. At 10:42 a.m., I got a call from June. She didn't even say hello. "They're bleeding," she said, calm but sharp. We got confirmation from 2 clients that they'd pulled out. One said they felt misled about who they were working with. The other said they can't be associated with a company being investigated for retaliation. I asked if that was it, and she gave a soft laugh. "No. It's only the start. One of the women in your group sent the file to a journalist she used to intern for. He's pitching a full piece, names, timelines, the internal memo you printed. It's going wide." It felt surreal hearing her say it out loud. For months, I'd been building a wall of proof brick by brick, and now it was no longer mine to carry. It had a life of its own. And it was collapsing their house faster than I imagined. 2 days later, someone leaked an internal email from Tyler himself. He was trying to distance himself from the scandal, writing, "I was never made aware of any formal complaints involving my behavior. If I was the cause of discomfort, I regret that perception." That perception. The wording alone sent a rush of heat through my chest. I read it 3 times before saving it in the binder, not because I needed it legally anymore, but because it was exactly who he was. A man who would walk across your boundaries, deny it, and then apologize for how you felt about it. But that leak didn't go unanswered. Just 1 day later, a former junior associate, someone none of us had even known, posted a thread on X detailing how Tyler had cornered her after a holiday party and made inappropriate comments about her outfit. She said she'd reported it the next day and was told to be cautious with after-hours events. That thread exploded. Within hours, 3 more former staffers jumped in with their own stories. One even shared a blurry voice memo from a meeting where Melissa had said, "Let's just keep her off the client-facing side until things cool down." The company's leadership tried to deny everything, but by then, it was too late. The narrative wasn't theirs anymore. It belonged to the dozens of women who had stayed silent and were now speaking in unison. Melissa, from what we were told by an internal source, tried to get ahead of the story by throwing Tyler under the bus. She allegedly told the board that she had escalated concerns but was overruled by leadership. That same day, her access badge was deactivated. The source said she left the office without saying a word, red-faced, holding a manila folder like a shield in front of her chest. And Tyler? Oh, Tyler fell harder. One of his biggest clients, a hospitality brand he bragged about nonstop, released a statement saying they were severing ties due to unethical practices by senior representatives. That alone was public embarrassment. But what came next was worse. A cached version of the company's internal review from last year was leaked, showing that Tyler had been flagged twice in the past for inappropriate boundary crossing and abrasive leadership communication. The company had documented it, and still promoted him. That was the match. The flame. The end. I got the call from June a week later. "It's done," she said. "They're dissolving the Reno office permanently. 3 board members are stepping down. The rest are seeking outside counsel. I asked her, did they ever reach out to us directly? She paused. Only once. Their lawyer asked if a quiet settlement was possible. I told them your conditions stood. And? They declined. So we filed suit. That word, suit, held a different weight now. It wasn't just an idea. It was real. Legal. Public. Permanent. The state was investigating. Depositions were scheduled. And Carson and Hale was officially in survival mode, with no ground left to stand on. Somewhere in the middle of all that, I did something small but symbolic. I bought a desk. Not a used one, not a hand-me-down, not something off Craigslist. A real, new, solid walnut desk from a small maker in Henderson. It arrived unassembled, and I spent a whole Sunday putting it together in the front room of the office space I'd just signed the lease for. My office. Mine. It wasn't flashy. Just a two-room suite with a shared kitchenette and old carpet. But it was clean. Bright. Honest. I painted the walls myself. Put up a corkboard. Labeled folders. And then I started calling. Tasha was the first to join. She said yes before I even finished explaining the role. I'm in, Sierra. Whatever it is, I'm in. Callie followed. Then Zoe. We started as a consulting firm for women-owned businesses, branding, strategy, team coaching. We didn't just help them grow, we helped them protect their people. One afternoon, a client asked how we'd gotten started. I looked at the women sitting around the small table and smiled. We used to work at a place that didn't hear us. So we built a place that does. The women in our office aren't survivors. They're leaders. They're brilliant, kind, and unshakable. And every time I hear one of them say something in a meeting that would have gotten them labeled too direct or too emotional somewhere else, I let it stand. I let it echo. Because now, it's not a liability. It's a superpower. I haven't heard from Tyler or Melissa since. I doubt I ever will. Last I checked, Tyler had scrubbed his entire online presence. No LinkedIn. No company. Just a generic resume site with vague phrases about consulting and growth. Melissa was rumored to be working remotely for a PR firm out east. I suppose she learned something about reputation after all. Sometimes I wonder if they ever sit with the full weight of what they did, not just to me, but to every woman they silenced, cut down, or ignored. Maybe they think it was all exaggerated. Maybe they still believe we were being dramatic. But I don't need their understanding. And I sure don't need their regret. We didn't take them down to get even. We took them down because silence was no longer survivable. One evening, I walked past the old Carson and Hale building downtown. It was gutted. Empty windows. Papered doors. For lease signs curling in the dry Nevada wind. I stopped, just for a moment, and whispered, "You should have listened." Then I walked away. They thought they buried me. They didn't realize I was a seed,